Alright, guys, just woke up this morning and the world is on fire again. Boy, do we have a fresh round of chaos on our hands. Now, Trump is back with his bombshells, and this time he's back after China. You can't really make this stuff up. Trump is having another meltdown, and it seems he can't handle China's retaliation. I mean, of course, they have to retaliate. No one's gonna lie down and let your tariff war steamroll over them. Now, China has expanded their rare earths restrictions and they added 5 new elements to it. In addition, there are now massive curbs on foreign semiconductor users and defense industries. They will need to seek China's approval if the final product contains or is made with Chinese material. An export license is needed. Now, this is similar to Trump's chip curbs on China. Beijing is mimicking this as they weaponize their supply chain. We are weeks away from the Korea summit and China is starting to stack up their leverage. Now, the issue here is how unprepared the US is for China's retaliation. Trump should have seen this coming a mile away even before embarking on this trade war. Now, how silly can this get? You are supposed to get your ducks in a row before liftoff, but US strategy has got it backwards. And here's how serious China's leverage really is. In May, a factory in Chicago had to shutter for a period because they ran out of rare earth magnets. From samarium to scandium, China has near dominance of the entire supply chain. In most cases, they control over 90% of supply. And guess who else has control of the remaining amounts? It's countries like Russia and Vietnam, BRICS members or their trading partners. And because of this, Trump has lost it. Now, if you're in the markets, you probably know what I mean. It's a bloodbath everywhere. The S&P is down by 3%. The Nasdaq dropped by 6% as well. In less than 24 hours, we have gone from vague threats to something concrete. Now, yes, Trump is jostling for leverage here, but he could have just set off a domino effect that is very, very hard to come back from. Now, Trump announces an incredible 100% tariff on China starting November the 1st, coming in just 3 weeks. He calls China's rare earths escalation a global moral disgrace. Now, I guess he forgot about his own tariff war on planet Earth. Now, in addition, there will be export controls on any and all critical software. Obviously, Trump is referring to chip design software for semiconductors. But herein lies the problem. You are now targeting services and you're doing it to China. This won't cripple Chinese tech progress, it will only accelerate their progress. And don't you think that the Chinese will retaliate again? Now, maybe Trump is angry he didn't win the Nobel Prize, who knows? But the effects of his meltdown are undeniable. Now, crypto investors lost hundreds of billions, even Chinese stocks lost a ton of value. But the real hammering came from US equities. Now, in just 40 minutes, the S&P raised more than 1.2 trillion in market cap. People buying the dip got absolutely hammered, and a further plunge just minutes later happened. Now, this is basically a rug pull by President Trump. The overvalued US market needed a catalyst for correction, and yeah, he delivered it in spectacular fashion. But can US stocks recover? Trump might have doomed the greater US economy with this stunt. Now, even Scott Bessent is looking really worried. He knows the trade war has stirred the pot and has disturbed the Kraken, and now the Kraken is dishing out payback on the US economy that is truly unprepared.
And we also saw China put on more rare earth export controls last night.
That's their usual leverage play before the big trade negotiations, correct?
Well, that and holding the American soybean farmers hostage. They politicized these soybean purchases, and most of them have gone to Brazil. And we're not going to let that happen.
Now, trying to take on China, who has supply chain dominance, is a losing proposition. Many critical US industries all rely on rare earths and, by extension, global trade. Now, Trump is just doing half measures to secure US supply chains, and it's definitely not enough. His own trade war is preventing him from making a strategic move. The White House is investing $36 million to acquire 10% in Trilogy Metals. The hope is to develop mines in Alaska to dig out more minerals and rare earths. Now, this sounds fine, this sounds dandy, until you realize the cost of production in the United States is much greater than China. It gets worse because now the mining equipment, a ton of which are imported, they are facing brutal tariffs as well. And when you have a high cost of production in mining, it introduces two big problems. The eventual products, the minerals, are coming out at a high price. So all your downstream industries like car factories or a chip plant, they are forced to pay even more now. The next problem is even more dire. You are at the mercy of a Chinese squeeze that could decimate your industries, and nothing can be done. Chinese industries dominate the mine production of rare earths, 70% in 2024. How can you even compete with that? They produce 270,000 metric tons, and the US stands at only 40 grand. China can flood the world with rare earths to push down prices and get even more market share. Meanwhile, the US will be stuck with subsidizing their domestic mining industry. And here's the terrifying part: China can keep this up literally forever. They have half of the world's rare earth reserves. US reserves are just 4% that of China. So that kind of wraps up the rare earth argument. Now, I have no idea what multiverse Trump is operating in. It sure isn't in this realm of reality. And if you think the rare earth debacle was bad, imagine escalating a tariff war. Trump is now having second thoughts about cancelling his China meeting. Suddenly, he might still want to meet President Xi. Maybe this is why US jobless claims are rising amid the government shutdown. US data is unavailable, so Goldman did an estimate here. Initial claims have risen to 235,000 last week, higher by 11,000 people. A quarter million federal workers are also walking around without pay, and Trump is threatening no back pay for some of them. Trump's escalation with China is coming amid this shutdown chaos. So pray tell, what happens when the tariffs get jacked back up to 100%? Who really pays for the tariffs? It's not gonna be China. They can easily export their stuff out to the world. Their exports to the US have dropped by 30%. Now that much is true. But China's overall exports to the world have grown by 7 to 10%. That is an even bigger win. The big losers once again will be the US consumer and American companies. According to Goldman, US consumers will eventually eat 70% of the total tariffs. So if prices rise by $10, Americans will have to eat $7 of that increase. US companies will have to withstand a 15% increase as well, which means they will have to pass the cost down to consumers. Because if they don't, then there could be massive layoffs because their own input costs are flying to the moon. However, we have not seen a big crescendo yet. The price increase we have seen thus far is pretty mild. We are still in the midst of a ramp up period where Main Street will feel the price shock pretty fast. And better sit up for this one, guys, because this is coming at the same time with Trump's dangerous threats. If tariffs on Chinese goods hit 100%, this will be a double blow to everyone's budgets. Now, till June, consumers have only absorbed 22% of tariff costs, but their share will rise to 67% really soon. That's a tripling of the tariff pain in the store shelves. Meanwhile, US companies will shoulder less of the tariff burden. It will drop from 64% to 10%. So the level of demand destruction will be breathtaking if things escalate. Now, it's important we realize China is just sitting back and they're chilling. Now, sure, they might raise their own tariffs on US goods to triple digits as well, but American goods are already uncompetitive with the existing 10% or so. Plus, we have high IQ geniuses in the White House that deny tariffs are a tax on Americans. Our best friend does not agree with Goldman's assessment of the US tariffs.
Goldman Sachs says 86% of the tariff revenue collected so far has been paid by American businesses and consumers. So just bottom line, Mr. Secretary, do you acknowledge that these tariffs are a tax on American consumers?
No, I don't.
Even though you have companies saying they are going to have to increase prices, and given the fact that 86% of these tariffs so far have been paid by Americans.
You're quoting Goldman Sachs. So
yes, Goldman Sachs, correct.
I made a good career trading against Goldman Sachs.
Now, China's playing chess while the US is playing snakes and ladders, not even checkers. At least there's some semblance of strategy in checkers. Trump is just rolling the dice blindfolded here. Well, China just took their own retaliation to the next level. I want us to recall the Panama Port Canal saga. That was a grand mess. Basically, the US wanted to acquire a bunch of global ports from C.K. Hutchinson to corner China to get Chinese vessels to pay huge amounts of docking fees at US ports. Well, China has played their Uno reverse card. Why let the US have all the fun? China will start levying special fees on US vessels docking at Chinese ports, and this will happen in just 3 days' time. The levy will start at 400 RMB per net ton, which will escalate yearly until we hit over 1100 by April, and that's around $56 to $156. So if a US ship with 100,000 tons of cargo docks in a Chinese port, Beijing will collect more than $10 billion in port fees. It gets even crazier. Now, China has laid down a bunch of conditions that are going to choke the US shipping industry. All the grand plans of getting the Koreans to build US vessels just got torpedoed. And if the world's biggest manufacturing economy, which is only going to grow bigger, is going to shun US vessels, is there really an urgency to build American ships on American soil? Now, getting the port levies is cool. Yes, the amount collected will stack up as China's economy grows, but the real agenda here lies deeper than just a few $1 million here, a few $1 million there. Now, if US companies have enough of a stake, the vessels will be considered American. Plus, ships that fly the US flag or built in the US will also be targeted. So there goes the US maritime industry. There's over 11 million gross tons now at risk of paying new Chinese levies. So what's going to happen? Will they change their flag to Panama or maybe even China? How about the future of US heavy shipping? Now, this is a rug pull that will make the Koreans hesitant about going into the US to build ships. And that's why we said the Panama Canal mistake would backfire. The US tried to play monopoly on the high seas, and now Beijing is learning to use the exact same plan. But there's another agenda with taxing US vessels on Chinese ports. Beijing is trying to slow down trade with the US themselves. Specifically, China wants to cut away US imports. We are now in a tit for tat world. This is the new reality, and the decoupling will not stop until someone surrenders. Now, in September, US container imports fell by 8.4% year on year, but the volume from China collapsed by incredible 23%. That is high margin business that some Chinese exporters have lost. Beijing is now trying to use non tariff measures to make US exports to China harder and harder. And the shipping levies is probably the start of more to come. So if we can't sell to you, we'll make you crawl through glass to sell to China as well. And maybe that's why Trump suddenly did a Taco Tuesday on a Friday. It's really hilarious, but the US realizes that their hand is a rather poor one. Suddenly, the meeting with President Xi is back on.
I'm going to be there regardless, so I would assume we might have it. But it was shocking. I can tell you, Howard and I and Todd, we all, Scott, we were all speaking about it before. We said, where did that come from? It was just, that was out of the blue, right? Out of the blue, they came up with this.
So hang tight, guys. And for those of you who can take this economy seriously, tell me how you do it. I have to salute you because it's one big clown show and nothing makes sense anymore. IQ levels are melting down. But let me know what you think. Will Trump really hike China tariffs above 100% again? And how will Beijing hit back? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.